The program is in progress. Now, we did not meet last Sunday because the service ran a little longer than anticipated. And so we're taking the turning points 11 and 12. We're following this book by Mark Lode on the 12 turning points of church history. And this will be the very last session for this unit. Okay, the 11th turning point is discontent in the modern West and the French Revolution in 1789. So this is the beginning of the breakdown of Christendom, where you have the emperor and the church kind of working hand in hand. That was a situation that prevailed for 700 or 800 years. But with the French Revolution, this is symbolic of the fact that Christendom in Europe is coming to an end. And this is a revolution that wanted to throw off what they thought to be the heavy, thin hand of the church, because it's not just the nobles and the kings, but also the bishops and the church that people were against. Because the church actually is an institution, is actually a good thing, but a church as an institution can also become oppressive. And many people at that time actually thought that the church was becoming oppressive. Instead of a tiny elite of kings, nobles, and bishops, the top power would be grabbed by the people. The revolution turned to a bloody access. And when they actually executed King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, Europeans were shocked, because this is not something you do to monarchs and nobles. So the revolution ended European Christendom as the dominant expression of Christianity in the world. So this is the French Revolution. And then following that, Napoleon started a period of fanatical worship of collective human power. See, because when sort of God is out of the picture, then people said, when you do not believe in God, you do not end up believing in nothing. When you do not believe in God, you end up believing anything and everything. Right? So this is what happened. And the next candidate, of course, is collective human power. I mean, if you don't believe in God anymore, that's fine. But our next candidate is myself or my nation. And so when God kind of disappears from the picture, the situation actually turns desperately wrong. You have nationalism, ideology, the state, and class warfare. This is Picasso, later in the 20th century, which proved what is the most destructive in human history. I used to think when I was growing up, talk about the headhunters of Borneo, where people attack other villages and kill them, and then collect their heads and display them and so on. We thought that was absolutely terrible. But now when you think about what we do in the 20th century, 500 years from now, when children are going to school, people say, in the 20th and the 21st century, people actually sent airplanes, to bomb other people, killing men, women, and children. So actually, when you think about it in those terms, the world today is a much more dangerous place than it was earlier. And so when we think that come to the 20th century, you have science, you have all this knowledge, you have better communication, you would think that the world would be getting better, but it didn't. Temporal realities replace Christian realities at the center of European loyalty, preoccupation, and cultivation. And people just aren't interested in spiritual things anymore. Now, William Temple wrote a book called Nature, Man, and God. All right. So if you're going to think about human life, these are the three main categories they have to use. Okay, so let me see if I can make this work. I want a felt pen. Okay, now here's nature. All right, now nature is, we think of nature as like the world, all right? But human beings are a special part of nature because human beings can actually alter nature. I mean, everything in nature happens by cause and effect, but human beings can't break the cause and effect chain and turn it into something else. So the way we put it is say, human beings are part of nature, but human beings transcends nature, all right? We are part of nature, but we're kind of more than nature because we have the capability of making choices and actually changing the course of nature. All right, so it's appropriate that we put man in a separate category because human beings transcend or somehow goes beyond natural nature. All right, so let's see. You want to see this? Now, God is in nature, all right? So people say, I look out in nature and I kind of sense the presence of God. So God is in nature, but God also transcends nature. God's not trapped, in the natural world. God actually, like human beings, transcend nature. God also is in nature, but also transcends nature. All right? So it's appropriate to have a separate category for this, and this is the category of God. All right? This is so much fun, okay? Now, in biblical times, people were interested in God and nature. They weren't, God and man, the relationship between God and man, and they weren't that interested in nature. As a separate entity. But then, when you come to modern times, they were trying to explain everything by the categories of nature and man, and we don't need this. All right? That's what some people say. We don't need the category of God. Everything can be explained if we use the categories of nature and man. Right. So this is what has happened. So in the people who are spiritual but not religious, right, there's no God out there because the God is inside of you. The deepest inside of you is God. So actually, there's no point in praying because there's nobody out there to really talk to. But you can sense the presence of God. You can feel spiritual, but it's not personal. Are you following me? Mm-hmm. Okay. Only people that are getting PhDs in religion know this. All right. So to me, that's a simple way to think about this. All right. So now you have the scientific, here's Newton, and he showed that the universe can be described by precise mathematical formula. Now he himself was a believer. Many of these early scientists were Christians, but that led others to think that human life can be understood without any reference to God. And then you have Auguste Comte, a philosopher. He said human development consisted of 3 stages. First of all, there's the religious, the theological. Then you have the philosophical. And then finally, this is the scientific. And so he thought that as the human race progressed, that we moved beyond the theological and the philosophical, and the scientific can explain everything. Right, the scientific can explain everything. So he thought that with the passage of time, religion will actually disappear completely. then no thinking person would think in a religious way at all. Now here's the problem. The problem is a religious faith addresses problems like, where did we come from? What is life for? You know, why should we bother to struggle? Why should we just all commit suicide? What is the purpose of life? Well, none of these the scientists never even address these issues because A, they feel it's not important, and B, those are things nobody can know anyway, so they become agnostic. But then, it doesn't keep them from believing in something, all right? So you say, if you say, I don't believe in God, then I'll say to you, can I take you out to coffee? And if I talk to you for about 45 minutes, I can discern what your basic convictions are. All right? Everybody lives by certain basic convictions, and the Christians do, non-Christians do. Everybody has a set of basic convictions, proven or unproven, which actually guide their life. So the people that said religion's going to die, well, the fact is, it's not happening. So that's something you don't need to think about. People say religion in the 20th century with science is going to disappear, but it hasn't disappeared. It doesn't look like it's going to disappear. Now we have to ask why. Why? And the reason is that religion, even though it's not infallible, at least thinks these are serious questions that need to be addressed. Now, we might not address them very well, but at least we're addressing them. Karl Marx. Oh, sorry. Darwin. He looks like Karl Marx. Well, he wrote The Origin of the Species, you know, and the idea of natural selection, the idea that things are not just created exactly the way they are, but they change in the process of time in order to adapt to certain kinds of environment. So there's all kinds of scientific evidence for this, and so people took his ideas and decided that maybe all of creation can be explained through evolution and so on. Now, of course, it doesn't address the question, how come people can adapt? But it created the impression, especially for people that would feel that like God made everything, you and I, people, animals, exactly the way they are now, and things never change. Well, things evolve. So Christian thinkers that, well, God works in and through evolution. So what's the matter with that, right? Here's Karl Marx. He saw religion negatively as an opiate of people. And what he argued was that you have all these people who are poor and powerless and so on, and religion comes to comfort them and kind of keep them in their place. And actually, it keeps them from being aware of their circumstances and doing something about it. Right? So he thought that religion was not a good thing. Sigmund Freud, psychologist, a psychoanalyst, but this is what he said: religion is a system of wishful illusions together with a disavowal of reality, such as we find nowhere else but in a state of blissful hallucination, confusion.
Wow.
It runs something like this. When we're children, we feel safe because we have a father. But then, as we become adults, our father is not in the picture anymore. Then, according to Freud, we invent a Heavenly Father who's always there with us wherever we go. And Fry said, no, this is not good because it keeps you from being a responsible, mature person. So he says, religion, the 11th commandment is, thou shalt not question. Nietzsche, 1844 to 1900. If you can read German, that says God is dead. Now, when people tell me that God is dead, then I feel like saying, well, was he sick for very long? Was it a painful death? And when exactly did this happen? But let's say, and this is, when people say God is dead, I think that we can understand and say, well, God doesn't matter anymore, right? It's that nature, man, and God. Nature and man can explain everything. When you say God is dead, God doesn't matter anymore. It's not a necessary category. So now, when you have this onslaught, of attack on traditional Christian faith, then some theologians like Adolf Harnack try to reduce the Christian faith in such a way that everybody can easily believe in it. So what he said is that when you look at the Christian faith, it could be reduced to 3 propositions. He said that the simple gospel of Jesus had been lost when it conceptualized itself in Greek terms. Or some people say, you have this simple religion of Jesus, and then Paul made it very complicated. He said, he reduced Christian faith to the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man and women, and the infinite value of the human soul. Because that's what the Christian faith, when you get right down to it, that's what the faith is about. That led Richard Niebuhr, a theologian, said, what we have now is a God without wrath, brought men without sin into a kingdom without judgment through the ministration of Christ without a cross. Right? This is a complete reduction of the essential elements of the Christian faith. I mean, you can say, all I believe in is the brotherhood of God, and the fatherhood of God, and the brotherhood of man, and infinite value of the human soul. But that's not the faith that's been given to us. That is not the Christian faith. That is something very different from the Christian faith. Adrian Niebuhr.
James?
Yes.
Is that comment meant to be a serious comment, or is that sarcasm? It feels like sarcasm.
Well, it's not. He's commenting. I mean, if you have this Christian faith and you reduce it down to a few principles, then it's not the Christian faith anymore, as we understand it. There's no sin.
That's why
right?
I wondered if that's supposed to be sarcastic.
The Christian faith says human life is infected with sin. We're out of sin, meaning not just breaking a lot of rules and regulations. We're out of relationship with God, and then everything else falls apart. So I mentioned this before. It's like when we first had the internet, there were no viruses. No viruses. You're perfectly safe. Then viruses came in. Now you need all kinds of things to combat the viruses. And every now and then, the virus actually kills your computer. I mean, like, sin leads to death. I mean, each virus has a are not just bothersome, they're deadly. So Christian faith says human life has been infected in such a way, they don't pay attention to it, they don't do something about it, it's life-threatening. Right? So when Paul says sin leads to death, he's saying something like that. That the fact that we're out of relationship with God is something serious, and you need to pay attention to it. You need to pay attention to it. Schleiermacher. Now this is very interesting because Schleiermacher, he's a really brilliant theologian. I actually read this big book that he wrote. And when he died, there was a huge, huge funeral in Germany because he was a brilliant. And what he said was, okay, let's grant that we cannot talk about a God that we cannot see, but he says we have within ourselves the consciousness of God. And so for him, theology was the examination of the Christian conscience. In other words, our sense of awe and dependence in the presence of the mystery of our lives. Right? So for Schleiermacher, he made theology an examination of the Christian conscience. And and Kierkegaard said, hey, Christian life is not about you thinking about something. Right? Christian life is not about you just thinking, is there a God, and so on. Christian life is about the fact that you're in a concrete situation. You have to be there to make a decision. You don't have all the facts. So sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. You know, without all the, you don't have all the information. But you still have to act. Right? And so life is not just a matter of acting on the basis of what you know. Life often involves acting in the presence of the need to make a decision that affects your life, where you have to have confidence, you know, that the way that I've chosen is the right way. So Kierkegaard tried to move Christian thinking away from just you sitting down thinking, hey, I'm a human being, frail, my life is contingent, it doesn't last very long, I'm vulnerable. I still need to decide, you know, how I'm going to live my life. So he's kind of shifted the discussion. This approach is called existentialism, existence, you know, our human existence, and how we negotiate that. Now, while all this is going on, there are a lot of Christian thinkers, really smart people, you know, that are writing to kind of counter some of these arguments. And Joseph Butler, here are some examples, William Paley, and their work was very substantial, but it couldn't overcome the dramatic changes in the way people thought about the world. Today, when people like C.S. Lewis, there have always been Christians, thinkers, theologians who are trying to counter this drift, this intellectual drift that prevails today. So in Europe, Christian faith was not banished, but it was definitely marginalized. So today, for example, in Europe, only about 10% of the people are religious. 10%. The influence of the church waned and the ranks of the faithful reduced in numbers. Now, while all this is going on, there were some both among Protestants and Roman Catholics, who put their emphasis on the personal and the devotional rather than in terms of influence and power. So these are people saying, okay, we don't have the bishops anymore. Don't worry about it. You know, Christian faith is not having political power. It's about something else altogether. So, while the Christian faith is waning in Europe, revival movements in various places show that secularization was not going to blot out faith in the West. So while it's kind of decreasing in Europe, it's started really growing in other places. And many of these movements are connected with social issues like the abolition of slavery and the elimination of child labor and abuse of children in factories. Also, prison reform, women's suffrage, the temperance movement, the social gospel, including the formation of unions for workers. So, the receding of European Christendom did not mean the collapse of Christianity, for it coincided with the blossoming of Christianity beyond Europe. So that's the interesting thing. I mean, like, people say, now, sometimes I talk to people who are in small churches that are dying. So because their own church is dying, they think the whole Christian faith is dying. Right? Or they belong to a big church with 5,000 members, they think the church is prospering. All right. I mean, so we can't generalize, you know, from the local situation, but taken as a whole, the Christian faith is the largest religious in the world. There are more Christians than any other religious tradition. Are you ready for the last one? Okay. Are you ready?
Ready.
You really are. Okay.
Ready.
Every now and then, without saying amen, you have to show some indication that you're still alive, okay? Now, in 1910, there was the Edinburgh Missionary Conference, and it included only Protestants, 80% from Britain and the United States. And at that time, if they talked about missions, it meant missionaries going from Europe and the United States to other parts of the world. So in 1950, in the 1950s, when I started being a pastor, when we talk about missions, we meant people going from the United States or from Europe to places like China, Africa, and so on. And in my first trip to Hong Kong in 1962, we still had like 12 to 15 missionaries actually in Hong Kong. Today there are none. Today there are absolutely none. And what happened in Idaho is like in 1974, in Lausanne Conference of the World Evangelism, they had 2,700 delegates. At least half were from outside Europe and the United States, coming from 100 different countries. All right, so in the last half of the 20th, the whole thing has changed. The whole thing has changed. Now, we still have missionaries, but like the preponderance of the Christian work that is done in Africa and Asia and different countries are done by the people there. Now, like in 1962, when I went to Hong Kong, the seminary in Chung Chi College was staffed entirely by missionaries from Europe and the United States, all the teachers. Today, in Hong Kong, there are 10 or 12 seminaries. And all the faculty are Chinese. they're educated in Oxford and Cambridge and really good schools in the United States. And there are at least 100 people in Hong Kong that have PhD degrees in church history, New Testament, or Hebrew scriptures. So that's been a dramatic change, actually, in that respect. The Edinburgh Conference would later evolve into the World Council of Churches that was organized in 1948. Now, in the 19th century, the early missionary William Carey in India, Judson, a Baptist in Burma, and David Livingstone in Africa. These are representatives of the missionary effort at that time. The church expanded at a terrific human cost. In 1851, 70,000 Catholics in Vietnam were killed. In 1866, 25,000 Catholics in Korea. In 1885, 100,000 Catholics in Indonesia. And in 1900, 50,000 Protestants and Roman Catholics were killed in the Boxer Rebellion in China. What happens when Christian faith goes throughout the world is it becomes kind of indigenized. So people are saying, like, if you're a Christian in China, then you can say, I'm a Confucian Christian, a hyphenated. It's like I'm saying, we could be a Christian with a Chinese accent. We're still Christians, but we're Christian with a Chinese because the culture, the way we relate to each other, the way we think about things, that's also a gift from God, and it's different. I mean, Chinese culture, the way people behave and act and so on, is different from American culture. So you can be, the people at the Cantonese service are Christian in a little different way. They're Christian with a Chinese accent. We're Christians with an American Chinese accent. And so what happens is that when it goes to different places, you can expect that they will express their faith in different ways. And here are two examples. Yoruba Christian faith in Nigeria has connections with the Yoruba religion, which includes reliance on dreams. And then the Zionist movement in Africa, they employ many elements of African religion, such as exorcising demons, ecstatic dancing, healing, and elaborate initiation and purification rites. Okay, in the 20th century, Martineau also indicates other things that we might consider. The growth of the Pentecostals, the Vatican II, which aimed to preserve church tradition while making necessary adjustments to the modern world, permitting the use of the vernacular in worship. You know, in the 50s, everything was in Latin. I mean, you go to a Roman Catholic church, everything is in Latin. Not anymore. Affirm papal authority, but with a more conciliatory tone. I mean, the Roman Catholics, they are much more friendly to Protestants than they used to be. Urge bishops to involve lay people in guiding the life of the church. So Roman Catholic Church have church councils now, where lay people are involved and they work in ministry. Women in ministry. More women show up for church, and now more are attending seminary. In some seminaries, as many as half of the students are women. Women contribute toward the recovering of the contemplative dimension of faith, and there's a new appreciation for women's role in the Bible and in Christian history. Bible translation. In 1900, portions of the Bible available was 537 languages. But in 1980, which is 30 years ago, that number had grown to more than three times in 1811. The survival of the Russian church is another thing that in 1970 attacked the Orthodox Church during the revolution. Stalin picked off where Lenin left off. Monasteries were closed and priests were slain or died in labor camps. There was a let up in World War II when help from the Orthodox Church was needed to get to the Germans. Also, you could say Christians in China. Actually, there are more Christians in China now, today, than before the communist takeover. Believe it or not, we have time left over. Do you have any questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, you were showing slides of in Africa and other places where there was a different slant on Christianity. What happens if there's a conflict between that interpretation of tradition?
I can only hear part of that. I need to have a helper here. You were asleep, so I'm not.
Did you want to translate?
Basically, he's asking, what if there were conflict in different philosophies, local philosophies with church doctrine?
Oh,
Who would prevail? What would prevail? How would it be determined what would prevail?
well, Christians have always expressed their faith in a variety of ways. Sometimes they get really, sometimes they fight with each other because they think this is so important that if you believe that, it's going to endanger the faith. That has always been that way. It's that way today, and it will be that way tomorrow. So when we resolve this, like the situation about homosexuals, that is splitting the church today. When that is resolved, something else will come up. So that's a permanent feature of human life. What you need to decide is the theological posture you will take when you encounter differences. So I don't know whether that responds to your question or not, but yes, that theological, different understandings of faith has always been a cause of a contentious issue in the church, as in everywhere else. And it's like that in politics. It's like that everywhere. Yes.
Taking that one step further, I have a lot of trouble when I hear of faithful people killing each other off in the name of their faith,
Yes.
in the name of Christianity. It has to give you pause to really think about, what's real, and sometimes to question Christianity used as a weapon.
Yes. There's good religion and bad religion. All right, so religion is not always good. I'm just reading a book now talking about bad religion in America. A lot of, after I read the book, I might summarize it for you, maybe during this summer series. It's about bad religion, and a lot of religion in America today is bad religion. And the fact that you're bothered by that means that you think it's wrong, all right? The fact that you're bothered by that means that you think it's wrong. I think it's wrong that you have these fanatical people that feel they're so right, and that you're so wrong, that for the sake of your soul, I have to kill you. Right? So we know that's wrong. I mean, so there are people on both edges that are, so that's bad religion. And a lot of the things that are done in the name of God actually dishonors God. So when the commandment says, don't use God's name in vain, it means that God's reputation is in your hands. So if somebody says, well, if being a Christian is like XYZ, the last thing I want to be is a Christian. And Gandhi said, I like Jesus, but most of the Christians I know are not like Jesus. He said, if the Christians are like Jesus, he said, there wouldn't be one Hindu left in India. You know, so how people feel about the faith depends a lot on whether, to the extent that we live out the faith. I mean, it's up to us. So, I like people to say, you know, the people at the First Chinese Baptist Church, they're really different. You know, if I have young children, or if I have young people, I want my own children to associate with those people. Yes?
But please remember, even within our own church, we have the divides.
Yes, that's what we have to practice on each other. Okay? I mean, the church is the place. The church is the place where we learn how to live together in spite of our differences. All right. So now, you don't have to be in a church very long before you discover that there are some people you don't like. So what you do is you don't go to find another group of people that think and act and believe exactly the way you do. You have to cope with, now marriage is like that, right? I mean, after about 3 months, Marie discovered stuff about myself that alarmed her, right? I mean, so now once you discover that, you have to deal with that. You can't just say, and so what you discover is that you have somebody in church that you practice on them. You know, well, the first thing you do is you pray for them. All right. If you pray for them, you discover your attitude toward that person will slowly change. But so in the church in Antioch, they said, see how they love one another? They actually care about each other. Now, are we there? No, we're not there. We're learning how to do this, right? See, we're learning how to do it. Some of us are slow learners, and in every church, everybody is at a different place. All right. So now here's what I learned in the choir. I'm singing in the choir. I'm in the bass section. You saw me up there in the loft today. All right. I'm usually standing next to Bill Chin or Nelson. I can sing because they can sing. All right. They have to give me the first note. After that, I'm fine. And then if I come to a little patch that I'm not too sure of, I don't sing too loud. But see, without them, I can't be a choir member. I'm waiting for Victor to say to a new choir member, stand next to James. I mean, to me, that would be enough. Stand next to James. So that's what it's aiming for. Stand next to Arnold. Right. So now, next week we're going to start a unit on world religions, and then we won't meet on Thanksgiving Sunday because we're selling Chinatown stories. There's a Thanksgiving dinner. I think some people are involved in getting ready for that. So we're not going to meet on Thanksgiving Sunday. And we're going to end by December 16th, but we're going to cut out the work and ministry of the local church. Maybe we can save that for the summer series. Okay. So we have a handout for today, and then we have a one-page special handout that covers, which George has, covers all 12 points. All 12 points. So let's end with prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for the men and women who have gone before us and the struggles they had to figure out how to be a disciple for all the complexities and ambiguities of life. So guide us and lead us, because we are disciples on a journey, learning something new every day, learning how to forgive each other, respect each other, encourage each other, honor each other. Help us so to live our own lives that other people may see you in us and honor your name because of the way we live. So thank you for being with us. Guide us during this week. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Clarence.